Very interesting testimony. Now, like as I said, we are joined by a great host of guests here via Skype, Joseph Scott Morgan, Scott Major, and as always, my good friend, Michael Troiano. Michael, I'm not sure if I'm following you or you're following me, but let's start off with the questioning with you. Michael, break down this extremely complicated case that has so many key players and so many moving pieces. Do you think that the jurors are understanding this case, or is it maybe too many moving pieces at this point?
Well, early on, I think there's a lot of moving pieces, and that was brought up by the prosecution in their initial opening. And I know there was some criticisms of how broadly they explained all the different finger pointing, if you will. But I think it's important to basically cast that wide net early on and then allow the prosecution to start doing some finer pinpointing of each of the accusations. So essentially what we have here is a law professor who was gunned down. The motive apparently is that he was in a heated custody battle with his ex-wife, and that one of the defendants in this case had a relationship with the ex-wife through her brother, and somehow she enlisted her ex-boyfriend, who's the father of her children. And I know, please keep up with me, it gets a little confusing. And apparently that co-defendant was the gunman in this particular case.
Yeah, very complicated. Many people, I can only imagine this being a movie or a Days of Our Lives sitcom down the road. Joseph Scott Morgan, I want to piggyback off of what Michael Troiano said there. He's saying it's a wide net that's being cast here. Now, you're a man of science. Sometimes casting a wide net can mean inconclusive results. Do you see any way that that could be formed here, or if the net is too wide, we might be missing some key details?
Yeah, in a very broad sense, I guess that it could. But, you know, Brian, one of the really cool things, nowadays is that in forensic evidence, people, the first thing they think about is going to be DNA evidence. And it's because you can apply these astronomical numbers to it, and it puts a very fine point on that. I think probably in second place for some of the best evidence that's out there right now that's being utilized is digital evidence. And it's because it has specific electronic markers and can take this broad, if you use your idea, this kind of broad-ranging web that's out there that seems kind of loosey-goosey and disconnected, but when you apply that digital fingerprint to it, it begins to tighten things down, and it's very difficult to get past that. We're finding as technology evolves, it's getting even more of an uphill task for the defense to defeat that. And so these tiebacks with social media, and certainly in this particular case with phone records, is key.
Now, Scott Major, Joseph Scott Morgan brings up a great point of there being a quote, digital fingerprint here. Now, we've seen previous testimony of them being able to track the defendants, specifically Garcia's cell phone to different areas, thus corroborating what the then co-defendant, now state witness Luis Rivera, was commenting on. It seems like the digital fingerprint is here to definitely convict Garcia. But a lot of our viewers and a lot of our guests are saying, where is the purse? Where's the money person who set this all into fruition? And that seems to be a question that's bothering a lot of people.
I think that these two defendants are dead, no pun intended. I think that they're going to be convicted, and Magma Nua should be doing some real, should actually take the stand, even though I know many people won't agree. I think she should take the stand because she's got to offer an explanation showing a victimization, and she probably will connect up the dots to the Adelsons. And I think that you are going to see further investigation after this trial occurs of the Adelsons. I'd be stunned if they weren't indicted. The question is really who's going to be indicted and in what mechanisms and what manners are going to happen. But I think you can see by the development not only of the testimony of Rivera, but also the digital footprint, tracing how the money went in and out, how the Prius got to the particular defendants, and so forth and so on, that it is just a morass of just nightmare for the defendants, and I think it's going to be devastating for them. And so I think there's a tremendous uphill battle right now, and I think you're going to see that this case isn't going to end with this case. It's going to continue on.
I would agree. Now, our next clip is from the cross-examination of a friend of both defendants talking about how Magbanawa had dated one of the Adelsons, a key connection in this whole case. Let's take a listen. So the Adelson family seems to be this ever-present group of people who are always on the outskirts of this case. Of course, this is the family that many people believe started this murder for hire because the victim, Dan Markel, the Florida State University law professor, was actually married or was married in the past to one of the Adelsons. Now, I want to bring in our guest, Scott Major, first. The big thing that I was seeing here that I was having issues with, the ability for the prosecution to connect Magbanawa to the defendant Garcia and then also to the killing, because you didn't really have the person in the back end, Adelson's maybe or someone else, who's actually prompting her to do all of this action. It seems now that we're getting a strong connection between the Adelsons and Magbanawa. Is that enough to really drive home this conviction for the prosecution?
Absolutely. And I think that you're going to find that when you connect up that with the fact that money's being exchanged hands, the fact that she's communicating with the Adelsons and with at least one of the defendants, I think you're going to see, like I said, I think there's no chance for the defendant here unless she somehow takes the stand, presents herself as a victim, and somehow explains away or really challenges with enough ferocity that a jury would actually believe her in this particular case.
It's interesting, Scott. That's something we mentioned on previously here on the Law and Crime Trial Network. I want to keep that thought in your mind because I got a question about antagonistic defenses and her testifying and how that might limit her. But we're going to talk more about that in other trials after this break.